Alright, hello everyone, and welcome back to what is going to be my last video before the draft actually starts. For this video though, I wanted to go quickly over some like what my general big board would be, since the draft is literally tomorrow. And I thought showing off roughly my first 120 players on my board might help give some reference some of the players, especially later on in this draft, on talent and kind of where you might expect to see some of them go. So we got no time to waste. It is right around the corner. I hope you all enjoy, and let's get right into it. All right, so this is a very simple top five for me. I have Neil at one. He has not moved all along. I love the power combined with the ability just to move within that space. That just makes him deadly as a tackle. Experience at both sides. If you do have to criticize him, you could criticize him leaning in the run game. He does it, I think, to try to get some leverage. He is very tall. That's an easy thing to be coached out, though. Well, I shouldn't say easily. Doesn't always happen, but it is a coachable thing, in my opinion. I got Hutch and Thibodeaux at 2 and 3. I think those are self-explanatory. I've talked about that at length in previous mocks as well. I still like them early after everything. And rounding off top five, we still have the last two tackles. I think they are being considered in the top 10 in Equanu and Cross. Very different players. Cross is an elite player in pass protection and very solid. Uh, but only particularly in kind of these zone schemes. If you're a power scheme, I would not say drafting Cross is for you. Equanu is the almost polar opposite. Has issues in pass pro. Like he just straight up has issues in pass protection. He really likes to jab and attack a guy, which these NFL defensive players will get on him for. But he's just lightning in a bottle when it comes to the run game at tackle and guard. Especially when you're considering stuff like outside zone run or power where you got the guard pulling or the tackle pulling. Like my lord, that is where he thrives. And that versatility is what kind of gives him the slight edge above Cross, even though I think Cross is the more clean prospect. It's hard to see a guy who's got that level of versatility basically ready to go day one. Okay, so yes, I do have a receiver in my top 10. Wilson has been my wide receiver one all season long. He really continues to separate himself from the rest of the pack, at least for me. Uh, he was almost a lock for me to be elite early, and after his pro day where he basically showed off that he is more pro ready than even I thought, I'm ready for him to be elite and be extremely productive for whatever team takes him. Both of the consensus top two corners are now up in Stingley and Gardner. Uh, I liked him for different things though. Stingley with his insane matching and quick twitch ability is just it's just rare. There's tons of clips of him covering Jamar Chase like almost step for step in just blanket coverage. It's incredible. And then Gardner, I really love for that very physical and thoughtful play. Just both of them are great and they can fit so many systems. I don't think you're really going wrong picking either one. Jordan Davis now ranks higher than I thought. Uh, but my real big issues for the 340-pound man is that he just gets gassed quickly. I don't think I really couldn't have him this high. I mean, he's just that rare a player. You know, we were talking about elite of elite athletes, and he's probably one of a kind, and especially in a class that's as thin at interior defensive line as it is, he really separates himself. And another kind of surprise here is I really like Zion Johnson, but I did not expect him to crack my top 10, and yet here he is at number 10. He's about as clean as it gets at offensive guard. You probably could play him at center as well if you want. Some teams might think of that just because I think he's 6'3" if I remember correctly, which is a little shorter than some of the current NFL guards. Uh, he doesn't quite dismantle Nelson, i.e. Quentin Nelson, as my highest rated offensive guard ever, but Johnson makes a case. Just for pure cleanness, he matches well. His feet are not clunky. He's a very solid athlete. Will probably be a Pro Bowler early, and will probably be a great day one player. I don't really see any question in that. All right, from this point on, we're going to be going 10 at a time, and I'll only talk about a few prospects to help keep video length down. I'll be trying to talk about prospects I think are really the most interesting, or the ones I think that are a bit of anomalies compared to what I've seen for consensus. So a bunch of the wide receiver ones or round one wide receivers are now starting to make their appearance. Walker makes his appearance outside of my top 10. That might surprise some people. I like the player and his upside, but his rush win rates are just worrisome. Like when we're talking about taking him over Aiden Hutchinson, we're talking about Aiden Hutchinson with a 27% rush win rate compared to Walker's. I think it was 10 this year and 13 last year, if I remember correctly, or it could be reversed. Like I mean, we're talking a massive difference in win rate, and it doesn't count only when you sack the guy. The win rate counts throughout. How often do you just beat the guy in front of you? So if we're talking about a guy who should be going, top five, I need that win rate to be much higher. All right. Same almost goes for Johnson as well, except his ceiling's a bit lower and his tape for the run is kind of hot and cold. If you really want to see, I think you can watch him first. I think it's Equanu. I had some tape on him. So Johnson's also kind of in that same category for me, which is also kind of why he's down here. Probably the biggest surprise on this list is Elam coming in at 16. I love Elam's just energy. I love his mental processing, and I just love the ball skills on film. If you watch him on film, he's very smooth. There is really no hitching in his hips in transition. He plays very heads up, and he is extremely, how do I put it? Not just vocal, but like watching the tape when he watches one of his other teammates make a play, he is like the first guy to be jumping over there and congratulating them and getting them pumped up. He is a guy that's going to help a defense keep high energy and keep pushing forward. That's the kind of stuff you need, especially late in games when that game is tight and you're all gassed. That stuff matters very much. He's one of the easiest first round grades I've also given to besides the top two corners in this back. The one thing I do want to talk about Elam as well, I think his back pedal is kind of unique. It can almost get a wide receiver almost into a lull, right? Almost almost into just kind of just going through the motion. It can get them to kind of overestimate their ability to break him down. He kind of has this. It's not really wide. It's kind of really deep. It's really weird to talk about trying to describe the way he drops back. But watch the way he drops back compared to some of the other corners, and you might see what I'm talking about. And when he gets these receivers into this, and they really try to do like a curl route, some kind of comeback versus him, right, where they try to break him down. That's usually when he punishes them. So he's a very intriguing player, and that's kind of why he makes it this high on my list. All right, almost out of the first round now. We got a couple guys like Green and Hill who are pretty used to being here. Ojabo to me is still worth the first, although he is raw and coming off injury. Those athletic tangibles are there. His tool belt was very clearly already starting to be built in pass rush. He just needs to know kind of when to use it and where to use it. We have Roger Mccreery. He's the best man cover guy for me in this class. He gets physical. He does the small technical things right, which are really hard, especially when you're not an insane athlete. Like he's not insane. He's just good. So to get all the technical things right is really what makes him, just a separate individual from a lot of other man corners in this draft. If we're talking, if he's a slightly better athlete, right? If he's just that much closer to an elite athlete, we're probably talking a top 10 player. And a top 10 player who doesn't know how to play zone. Hamilton makes his appearance now. I still like him for some roles, but that physical testing told me the same thing that I saw of him on tape. Just some issues and just long. It's not really long speed. His long speed's actually okay, although didn't test very well. But it's really a lot of like the quick twitch stuff, a lot of the transition stuff is where I have problems with Hamilton, which can be protected if you bring him down to play more box or kind of some kind of nickel backer look, right? There's tons of ways you can move Hamilton around to protect that from him and still utilize all of his talent. But this idea that he is almost a can't miss player, I think it's an oversight as to what he can do athletically. Probably another one of the biggest surprises here is I have Trey McBride this high up. And when I was going through, usually I don't give first round grades to tight ends. It's usually quite hard for me. Uh, but after getting through all this, I could not have a could not have a high mark on him. The man blocks extremely well with leverage, just moves guys out within space, seals off edges. Like no issues there. You're like, okay, let's move to the passing game of that now. He's an insane athlete and just an absolute headache to guard in the passing game. You can line him out in slot. I saw them line him out at what was it, like X wide receiver versus a corner, and he just dunked on the poor guy. Like he is just a different level of player and an athlete, and I just there's no way he couldn't crack at least my top 30. He's just that different compared to most tight end prospects I have watched in recent years. Now, of course, we have guys like Kyle Pitts who went last year who are just again also freaky athletes, but Kyle Pitts cannot block the way that McBride blocks. McBride is a true do-it-all tight end in the vein of George Kittle and stuff like that. So I had to have him ranked that high. And I don't think there's any way if you're on defense you can keep him contained for very long. Okay, so more of the early wide receivers now make their appearance, as well as the top two running backs and some of the linebackers. Biggest guys I want to talk about are Winfrey and Petra, I think. So Petra is just a very clever safety that just flies around a defense. Guy is a high energy player that just keeps defenses churning and hungry to dish out punishment. Some of the executives that have interviewed him have compared this high energy leadership he has to that of Jamal Adams. If you guys are familiar with what Jamal does for that Seattle Seahawks defense and what he used to do for that Jets defense, great locker room guy. He makes his presence felt for his home stadium. I am sure they will get used to hearing him, earlier rather than later. And then we have Winfrey on the other side. Winfrey's a fun player that just honestly needs time. He has all the athletics you could ask for an interior defensive lineman, probably at 3 tech. And it's just a thin class at IDL in general. He knows what the moves are. He knows how to execute them. He just needs refinement in actually doing them, and not just doing them, but which one to use and when. He still lacks in recognition of which one to use, but when he does guess correctly, as we've seen in college or at the senior level, when he does guess correctly on what move to use for what the O line in front of him is trying to do, it's just an immediate blow up. It's almost immediate. So he's just gonna need some refinement, and a good IDL coach will just love to have him early. All right, rest of the linebackers make their appearance along with some of the second round wide receivers, and the first two quarterbacks on my board. Biggest surprises I probably need to talk about are Ryan and Tom. Uh, let's start with Ryan. I think Ryan could do all right at tackle, but the tape of him at offensive guard is just astounding. His hands and burst into contact from that position sounds like a shotgun going off. He just breaks these poor IDLs down and just embarrasses them. His tape at tackle versus Thibodeaux is also really good if you want to see just taking a talented player and making him utterly useless. It was a long day for Thibodeaux that day. So look for Ryan to try to take someone's job early. I would not be surprised if he manages to do so. Now talking about Tom, Tom's a very unique player. He meets basically every requirement I have physically to meet offensive tackle, and the league meets the same. We're talking about arm length, he meets that. Talking about foot speed, he meets that. Like every physical requirement he meets. He's just a little light. That's the really big question. It's just he's currently sitting at 304. A lot of tackles sit closer, that 315 to 325 range. So that's really the question is if that's going to hold up. I don't think it's going to be an issue if you play any kind of zone offense, and it showed at Wake Forest, any kind of zone run, any kind of zone play, RPO, no issues. Power, if it might be. So, if you're like the Ravens or the Raiders, for example, Patriots, I'm not sure on that one. I'm not sure if that one's going to help. You're going to really need to bulk him up and hope he doesn't lose anything doing so. Uh, Another thing I talk about Tom is while I have him ranked as just OL, and that is probably the most honest OL I could probably ever just assign someone. He could play offensive guard easily. If he fails at tackle, putting him in a guard is a complete reasonable thing to do. And not only that, he has long experience at offensive center and really good tape at offensive center. So really, when you're drafting Tom, you're like, we're gonna try him at tackle. If he's a great tackle, fantastic. If he's not, I'll try him at guard or center. Either one, whatever my biggest need is, and I have a quality player immediately. It is Equanu all over again, but just the lighter, more zone, somehow more zone heavy version of that. You know, a little more versatility since he can play center, and he can shadow edges like Cross like a mother. Like honestly, watching Tom shadow edges is very similar to Cross, but Cross just has that little bit extra clean footwork and actually ability to just keep a guy in than Tom. But that's what you kind of expect out of a guy like Tom. He's just versatile all over the place. You can see why in the last month he has spiked on people's boards. All right, last of the day two, interior defensive linemen make their appearance. Most of the time, they just really either need to bulk up or lose weight to fit some positions, uh, which really kind of pushes them down a bit. We usually call them tweeners because they just don't really fit anything perfectly. You know, like Leal and Hall, I think Leal's at 285 or 290 right now. He technically is the right size to play some form of 3-4 D end or that 4-3, Pete Carroll big body D end in the 4-3 scheme, 4-3 cover three. Logan Hall, same thing. He's at like 283 if I remember correctly last time I looked. It's just they lack some play strength and some consistency when it comes to some of the interior work, and some of the edge work as well. If they ever got kicked outside there or asked to do a stunt, so there's some talent here, but they have cleanup to do. I'll just say that. Two of the more interesting offensive tackles now also make my list, as well as the other two QBs and two edge players. Nothing I think is really out of the ordinary here, except maybe Troy Anderson making my top 60. Now, I don't blame anyone if they have not heard of Troy Anderson. He's another kind of guy like Tom, coming from a bit of a smaller school, although his school is much smaller. And he kind of came on late. This man has only one like actual full season at linebacker. He came off playing like split reps at multiple positions. He played quarterback and running back, along with having those splits at linebacker. But this first year, he played linebacker throughout. He's looked like he's played the position every year. Like he beats other linebackers for me. Like he looks like this has just been what he's played since high school. He has extremely great instincts and vision. That's probably coming from his time as an offensive player. He understands how to sort through traffic and gap scheming. He understands passing concepts super well for a guy who's, I think it was like 6'3", 6'4", 245 was what I think I had him weighed in and measured at. Just incredible. And then you put that on, he runs like a four, I think it's like a 4.44, 4.45. It's like, what? What players move that way at that size? I know it's not meant to talk about perfect fits, but if you see someone who runs the Fangio scheme defense, we're talking Seattle, we're talking Denver. I don't know if the Bears are going to continue to run it. Bears would be in that category. If we're talking that, I mean, Lord have like go get Troy Anderson early. I know he's probably raw wise probably a little closer to a third. Uh, but his skill set is just that unique that if you need that player like Alexander Johnson's used for this for the Broncos, where like they can line up on the line and then just heavily drop back into coverage super fast, but you need them to be a bit bigger, right? Because if they decide to run the ball, they need to be able to engage. So they're super unique players to be able to actually fit that. Uh, and that to me just makes them extremely worth it. I'd take him late second if I could. All right, couple of the last big names here for the late second, early third. So Mafe, Pierce, Austin, Woolen. They could all go earlier in this spot due to teams wanting to gamble on more high-end athletics. or like just a lack of depth at that position occurring. You know, if a lot of that position gets taken early. There's some personal favorites to make it here, like Cook out of Cincinnati, who's just a very, again, another high energy hybrid safety. And another Bearcat I've talked about at length that I love in Jerome Ford. I just love his play all around, honestly. Great long speed, extremely good vision, contact balance everywhere, can power through a guy, make a guy miss. He's a complete package to me. Another Bearcat, I mean, this time might just be all of Cincinnati, honestly, is Beavers. And man, Beavers is really intriguing to me. Another guy like 6'3", 6'4", 240, moves pretty well, pretty good athlete. Not as crazy as Troy Anderson, uh, but he's solid in coverage. He doesn't really, he knows to kind of match and follow a guy through his zone, but I wouldn't expect him to be, doing Kendrick's level of role where he'll actually just straight up cover a guy and has the athletics to do so. But really what's more interesting about him to me is his run defense and blitzing. The guy is a stone wall in the run defense, and you will not gain a whole hell of a lot of yardage versus him. This is another guy I love for a Fangio type defense. And I think he just sorts through traffic with ease. You want to blitz him? Excels there as well. Man, blitzing him versus either a tackle or a guard is just insane. He pummels offensive guards often through blitzes, and I mean I expect that'll probably keep up the next level. I don't know if this will keep up as well, but I've seen him take snaps at, I guess you call that hybrid edge role. And he was beaten on tackles there as well. He was creating pressure and getting to the quarterback. I just really love his very physical play style, and I think he's a very unique linebacker, almost in the mold of. Uh, I don't know if I want to say Donta Hightower because Hightower is a very unique athlete, but almost in that mold where they just have very unique skill sets to them. All right, tons of groups here that had formed when I was kind of doing this, and I think it's more dependent on scheme fit for which one takes which one. So I group Gordon and Emerson together, Benito and Agbar, White and Spiller, Hayes and Salyer for this. Like all those are all just I've grouped those guys together, and it just really depends on which one fits a certain scheme better or a team likes certain better. I think we're talking marginal differences, really. The only guy I really want to talk about is Petit Frere, and I'm starting to see some teams are some no, not teams. I'm starting to see that ESPN and all that are starting to finally push Petit Frere up into kind of third, second round. I'm glad I've had him here for a long time. I thought maybe I might have to defend myself on this one for a while, but I'm glad I don't have to. I'm really high on him for his zone scheme, and if I'm honest, I think he can really develop into a starting caliber offensive tackle given the time and training. He moves well. He gets to the second level often. I'd love to pair him with Munford, who's a little later on this team, as they're taped together as a tandem on the left side. Was some of the funnest tape I've watched. Honestly, both extremely high energy. They moved guys off and onto each other with just ease, and they just cleared lanes for guys. I'd love to keep them together if that's possible. But Frere's a little more raw as well. He's got moments. I've seen him really try to jab, and a guy just swipes him aside. I would not expect him to start day one, and if you are, I don't think you're expecting a whole lot of him early. But I do like him as a player, and I think he can develop sooner rather than later. All right, more groups here. We have Strong and Pickett, Goddick and Kinnard. And then we have Munford, Parham, and Ingram all grouped together. Different personal skill sets that if one team values a little bit more than the other, they'll have them higher. Uh, Woods is here. Jelani Woods in that. His tape was already solid, but that combine obviously is pushing him up a little bit. Having that long speed allows these offensive coordinators to kind of do a lot more vertical plays with a tight end, which doesn't happen too often, which does give you some versatility in what you can use on offense and what you can force the defense to have to cover. So that is valuable, and I think teams will show some value of that come third round, fourth round. I don't think you'll see second, but I wouldn't be surprised if someone, late second snuck in there. As for the other guys, I don't think anyone here is too really surprising. Maybe Engram being a little higher than normal, Parham being a little lower for me than normal. Everyone else, I think, is quite close to where they're often mocked. Oh, I guess Pickett's not. I'll talk quickly about Pickett. I just some of the traits he has at the age he's at have just worried me. I've talked about his hand size, and that is its own separate entity, is dealing with that. But you might be able to get around that depending on certain factors, like where he's playing, how often he's playing, and whether. Like, I wouldn't personally risk it because you can't control always where he's going to be playing. But if a team is, let's say 70% of his games are in domes, maybe it's not a big issue. But I've talked about Pickett's hand size at length. But we got things like bailing from clean pockets and forcing himself to play out of structure when structure is just the best thing to play. This is the kind of player that, like, Bill Belichick has a long line of beating on rookie quarterbacks, right? I don't know if you guys go back, like even the best ones, like Herbert. He got his pound of flesh from Herbert. He gets his pound of flesh from Zach Wilson. He's great for that. I am not entirely convinced that if Bill Belichick went against Kenny Pickett, he wouldn't just utterly destroy him. I think Bill Belichick would play mind games if he had to face Kenny Pickett, and it might actually just ruin his confidence. Which, when we're talking confidence with quarterbacks, that we're almost talking about ruining them as a player. So I worry about some of Pickett's decision making and his constant forcing himself to bail from a clean pocket. It's problematic. And the reason he's getting paired down here with Strong has decent tape actually, like really strong tape. It's just if you go, consider the injury and then you look at him post that injury, he's been rough. So you're gambling on him healing more than anything. There's just some food for thought when it comes to the quarterbacks here. All right, welcome to the group of very extreme athletes. We have Jurgens and Strange, both tested insanely high at their respective positions. Center for Jurgens, guard for Strange. Same goes for Tyndall and McCollum. Do look for these guys to potentially, again, go in the second if a team wants to guarantee they get this guy. Some of these athletic traits are insane. Like Jurgens, I saw Jurgens from the center position pick up an edge rusher. Like, do you know how insane that is? To get from center to covering an edge player that lined up wide nine. Like, that's just unheard of. He covered his tackle who made a very bad mistake. Guy faked inside and just clubbed the tackle out of the way. And Jurgen saw it and he just sprinted, like he got there so fast. He closed off. Extremely rare. And then we again Strange, like highest test in the last, like, I think it was like 2 decades. He's like the seventh highest guard athletically in the last. Oh, I think he's like, yeah, I think that's total if I remember correctly. Most athletic in the last 20 years or something like that. Tyndall, McCollum, I talked about them, I think, in their own respective mock drafts before. McCollum, maybe not. McCollum came out a little late. He's another guy who runs really fast, has more technical things correct. Comes from a bit of a smaller school, but I don't see it really mattering too much. He covers equally as well. So do look for those guys to go a little earlier, just in case. We have Garrett here. I think Garrett provides, decent rotational work at interior defensive line, which in this class is extremely hard to find. We have Damien Pierce. I talked about him for a good length now of what he can provide at running back. Was one of the earliest guys on Pierce. Some of the guys I want to talk about are Taylor and Jones at cornerback. Taylor plays outside, and his instincts and vision and zone coverage are just fantastic. Get this man in a cover 4 scheme, and probably by year 2 he could be a starter. Now we're talking about Marcus Jones, incredibly fun player to watch, extremely clever. He's so mechanically sound. Like, man, if this guy wasn't just 5'8", this is a guy who maybe edges up into the early second round, first round for me. But even at 5'8", I think he's almost a, you have to take him if he's there in the third. Like, you just have to take him. I think he could be a impact slot player for a very long time. I know normally slot guys do not go that early, but I think he's the definition of a premium in the eyes of, talking about Kenny Moore or I'm forgetting the guy's name, but for the Patriots, they had a guy that they've been there for a while, Jonathan Jones. There we go. Came back to me. But like, I'm talking about just immediate impact. I heard someone reference him. I think it was Marks. Reference him to uh, what's the guy's name? He used to play for the Niners. I can't remember his name. He just left though. But I think that's a great comp. Another guy who was really short, Kawan Williams. There, see, it comes back to me always a couple seconds later. Kawan Williams, great comp, great immediate slot impact. I think he I honestly would consider him a little earlier than this, even if I'm like the Bills or something like that. But they already have their slot. But if your team is ready to go, like, please consider that. All right, some interesting players now that really just kind of fell here for one reason or another. Bell is for the 40 time being even lower than I thought. I thought he's gonna run the 4.5s. He's more like a mid 4.6 kind of guy. Clark is here due to injury and not over extreme tape. Clemens is here. Had some law trouble a couple years ago, carrying an unregistered weapon. With all that being said, I think all these guys can play given the right situation and the right mindset. You know, Clemens to me has some of the better edge tape. I think he could have been a third round selection in this draft if certain things had worked out certain ways. Bell, I would have easily taken the second if he could at least ran a 4.5. I would have taken him in the second. But I mean, now it's kind of pushed him to that fourth, fifth round is what's kind of pushed him to. And Clark without that injury, I think definitely goes day two without any kind of question. He's got kind of a unique build, very, very just long, is what I can explain. It's not that he himself is overly tall, but his measurables are long. His arms are extremely long, which allows him to really just engage with guys and shed, stretch tackle, right? Put that arm out, grab the running back when he hits the gap. He's just unique in that way, and I think teams will like that. Keep an eye on these players, during the draft, post draft. It could be something special to them if they go to the right spots. All right, to round out my top 120, we have some fun players. We have Woods, who is an extreme athlete. He just covers ground insanely fast and could honestly be converted to corner if this safety thing doesn't work out. We have some quality corners here as well, like Taylor Britt and Williams, who I think could be very good starters in a certain scheme, as well as the other two edge players here. Lindstrom is the last player on my list. His brother plays guard for the Falcons. If you are a big fan of them, you'll probably recognize him immediately. And Alec projects well as his wide zone offensive center. If the Falcons, I mean, they don't really need center, but if they were to take some, it'd be kind of cool to have them together. I think he can project very well as a solid starter if he gets into that scheme fit and develops a little bit. A guy you probably haven't heard of is Uza Kanama. He's a wide receiver from Texas Tech. He's probably going to go, if I had to guess, sixth, seventh round. That's probably what I'd guess. He's intriguing to me at 6'2", 209, just turned 22, and I mean like just, I think it was only like not even a month ago. And he showed that he has great jumping ability and that his height does not slow him down in the shuttle. He's recovering from injury, so that is gonna push his stock down, probably well past this as well. But just do keep an eye on him. I think there could be something there if he gets to a certain scheme. I think there's a very vertical scheme which I think he will work well in, but I think there could be something if you see him maybe pair up with the Patriots later on. We'll see, but just do keep an eye on him. There's some quality players here that I think a team could snag a little later. End of third, mid third, into the fourth round, and they're going to give some very quality play time. Well, with that being said, I think this is how we're going to end my last video of the 2022 NFL Draft. I hope you all enjoyed the content over the last few months, and I look to be doing more content post-draft and give my thoughts on it all. Unless you follow me on Twitter, in which you might see some of my early opinions on the draft. I'm gonna be watching all 3 days, and I'll probably be, writing down my notes on them and tweeting about it. So with all that being said, I hope you enjoy the draft, and I hope to see you for another video. Take care.